Um, Today is August the 5th, 2011, and we are at the Children's Coalition Incorporated. My name is Carlton Cartwright. I'm the CEO and founder of the Children's Coalition Incorporated. And your name is?
William W. Jeffers, known as Bill.
Okay, Bill. Bill, when is your birthday?
9/27/23.
And what is your current address?
3522 Millbrook Way Circle in Green Acres, Florida, 33463.
Okay, and what is the name of the organization that you and I met through?
Well, we met over at the VA hospital here at the VA Medical Center in West Palm Beach. You may be referring to my association with the American Ex-Prisoners of War.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And let's see now. What branch of the service were you in, Bill?
U.S. Army Air Corps.
What was your rank? What was your final rank?
First Lieutenant.
Okay. All right. And where did you serve?
In the ETO. We flew out of England
Okay.
over Germany.
All right. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted just ahead of being called up in the draft.
Okay. Where are you living at the time, Bill?
At the time, I was living in Glen Allen, Virginia.
Okay, you were living. Okay. And why did you join?
Well, you mean why did I join the Air Corps? Or
Either. Well, you tell me. Which one? What is? Why did you join the service, the Air Corps, or initially? You know, what were your thoughts?
Well, I was registered in the draft.
Okay.
At the time, I was going to college at Virginia Tech in Virginia, and I was in my freshman year when war broke out in December of '41. I had an educational deferment, but as time went on, deferments didn't really mean very much because it was all at the call of your local draft board as to who they needed to fill a quota.
Right.
And I had many of my classmates called up in the middle of their school year, and even though they had a deferment as I did, I was deferred because my curriculum was in engineering.
Okay.
So with this going on around me, I decided that I better sign up where I'd like to go into the service rather than take my luck, whatever it might be,
Right.
being called up in the draft. And I preferred to get into the Air Corps if I could.
Okay. All right. Let's see. You recall your first days in service? Can you tell us something about that? What did it feel like? What was your I guess you went to OCS, boot camp training experiences.
Well, in the Army, it was basic training, they called it. My first assignment was in Greensboro, North Carolina, for basic training. And then after that, I was sent to what they called a college training detachment, a CTD as they called it, where they had assigned air cadets, that's the program I was in, assigned them to various colleges around the country, regardless of what your education background was. They wanted everyone to have a certain basic level of education in certain areas, and the CTD that I was sent to was in Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And from there, I went to a classification center run by the Air Corps in Montgomery, Alabama, I think it was. There you went through various tests and exercises to determine what your capabilities were and what might be expected of you.
Okay.
After that, I was sent to, I think it was to Maxwell Field, Alabama. And I forget what the purpose of that tour of duty was, but it was still in the training phase.
Right.
From there, I was sent to Aerial Gunnery School in Buckingham Airfield in Fort Myers, Florida. And from there, I was held in a training pattern waiting for an opening in navigation school. They sent us to Valdosta, Georgia, where we marked time until the class opening was in San Marcos, Texas, for navigation school. I went through navigation school, completed that course, and was commissioned a second lieutenant.
Okay. You remember any of your instructors?
Oh, I don't remember their names, no.
Okay. Okay. You okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. How did you get through it? What was it like getting through it? You know, obviously you got through it, and it seems like it was very extensive. So.
Well, it was, and you towed the line. If you messed up, it was easy to get washed out. I recall that in the classification center, after those series of tests and so forth, they posted a listing of what program you get into, and I was posted for navigation school. And there was a note at the bottom of that posting that if anyone had any questions about their classification, to see some Captain so-and-so. At any rate, I marched myself over to see that captain because I wanted to be a pilot in the worst sort of way.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I reported to him, and he wanted to know what was my reason for coming to him, and I said, well, I noticed that I've been classified to go to navigation school. I was so much in hopes of going to pilot training. Did I mess up on that? He said, oh no. He said, I'm looking at the record. You were qualified to go to pilot training or bombardier training or navigation training. But in the Air Force's wisdom, they thought you would be best suited as a navigator. He said, I can change that so you can go to pilot's training if you wish, but I want to tell you that at the whim of the Air Corps, you might get washed out, not because of improficiency, but because of a quota at the time. If the quota for pilots went down for a while, they'll wash you out. And not because you're incompetent, but because they just don't need you for that. And if that happens, you can't get sent to navigation school or bombardier school as an alternate. You'll be in a ground unit. I said, well, knowing that, I'll take my navigation training. Thank you.
Gotcha.
And I was glad I did that. I enjoyed navigation. It was a very interesting occupation, and when you got out of navigation school, you were good at it. That's one thing about the training that the service gave you. It was intense, and you didn't graduate from that particular assignment unless you earned it. That's the story on that.
Gotcha. Okay. Which war did you serve in? What theater?
I was in World War II. I was in the European theater. I was stationed in England at the 401st Bomb Group, 613th Squadron. I was assigned as a navigator in a B-17.
Where did you go? Do you remember arriving and what it was like? What was your job assignment? And I'm sure that you saw combat. Were there many casualties in your unit?
Oh yes, very many. Yeah.
So let's go back. Where exactly did you go?
Well, I wasn't in combat long. Mm-hmm. Our first mission was to Dresden. We managed to do that one all right, came back, and 2 days later we were assigned to fly a mission to an oil refinery in Geiselkirchen, Germany. Mm-hmm. Our particular crew was posted as a spare for that mission, which meant we would go up, assemble with the group, and if we would fly with the group until we reached the Dutch shore, and if no plane in the group, or the plane in the group had aborted, then we would come back. But we were to fill in if a plane had to abort or come back before they went further. And as it turned out, one plane did abort. We filled in and we flew the mission. And we were shot down on that mission. Not by fighters, but by flak.
Okay. Tell me about the casualties in your unit.
Pardon?
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Oh yes, yes. The Air Corps had an extremely high casualty rate. When a plane went down, you lost 9 or 10 men at that point. Either they were killed because of the incident, or they became prisoner of war, or some were managed to evade for a while. But for the most part, if you went down, if you got hit and went down, it was either you were killed or a prisoner, most likely.
Were you a prisoner of war?
Yes.
Tell me about a couple of you can tell me about that, and also your most memorable experiences. About your experiences in captivity and when you're freed.
I think the most dramatic part of my own experience on that mission was what happened before we became prisoners.
Okay.
As I mentioned, we were hit over the target by flak. We lost 2 engines in that incident, and with 2 engines out of service, you can't keep up with the group.
Right.
And so we had to try to make our way back alone, not with the group. The group went on. We couldn't keep up with them because couldn't keep up the altitude or the speed.
Right.
And so we kept losing altitude. We were trying to make it back to England. We got over, it was my job to get us back as a navigator, to plot a course that would avoid as much as possible enemy action from the ground, any aircraft installations and such as that. We knew where they were concentrated and would try to avoid that.
Right.
We got as far as Holland, and we lost another engine. Now we're down to one. And at that point we knew we weren't going to be able to make it back to England. And so we turned south about 10 miles off the coast of the Dutch territory, and in an attempt to try to make it as far as Belgium, which was in Allied hands at that point, and either crash land or parachute or whatever, but at least be in Allied held territory.
Right.
But the last engine failed then, and we were pretty low to the water. We had to ditch.
Right.
And the plane, in going in the ditching process, the tail hit first and it bounced up, and that caused the plane to dive into the water. And it submerged briefly and then came up. We started scrambling to get out of the plane. We did. There were 9 of us on that plane, and we all got out of it. It took us quite a while, over an hour, to finally get into a life raft. There are 2 life rafts or dinghies on a B-17, but one of them couldn't be released because the skin of the ship was crumpled at that point, and only the right-hand raft released. But at any rate, the plane went down pretty soon after it hit. We all got out, and it was a good hour, I guess, before we were able to crawl aboard the one raft.
Right.
We, as I said, we were about 10 miles offshore. We couldn't see shore from that point. But the weather was clear, and before we went down, our radio operator had sent a message to Air Sea Rescue with our position in the hopes that they would pick us up.
Right.
But as the day bore on, we hit the water about 3:30 or so in the afternoon, and the whole afternoon went by and nobody showed up. And we speculated that maybe the radio operator speculated that it probably our trailing antenna was torn away by the stuff that we were jettisoning from the plane trying to lighten the load.
Okay.
Got caught in the trailing antenna and may have torn it away, so maybe Air Sea Rescue never heard us.
Right.
And night fell, and at first we could see the stars. We had one paddle on this raft, but we managed to use it, and using the North Star we could see, we paddled eastward, hoping to hit land. But mist started falling in. We couldn't see the stars anymore. It became foggy and misty, and this was cold. This was the 16th of February, 1945. And we put down in the North Sea. I guess the water temperature probably was in the order of the water that you have in your refrigerator to keep cold. Probably it was in the mid-40s or something. And when darkness came, it was very cold. we ceased paddling. We're just drifting, and we were getting colder. We all were wet, and as we sat around this raft, the raft is oval shaped, and those who were at the ends of the raft, as all were sitting around the perimeter,
Right.
they were higher up off the water than those of us who were on the side of the raft.
Mm.
Those in the side of the raft, we were up to our waist,
Uh-huh.
but we drifted for nearly 12 and a half hours, and we were just about gone. We would not have made it till morning.
Uh-huh.
We saw we every once in a while we'd shout and holler, hoping someone would hear us, but we got no response. Then a white flare was set off, an area flare. It illuminated the area. We couldn't see anything but the glow in the fog and mist, but we shouted and hollered as loud as we could. Pretty soon we didn't hear any engine. We thought maybe a ship was, a surface craft was nearing us, and we'd shout the zero in on where we were. But when we fell silent, we didn't hear any engine. So we didn't know what we were seeing, and soon another flare.
Uh-huh.
Again we shouted and so forth, and again we heard no engine. And then a spotlight or floodlight turned on, and we could make out figures on the shore. And it turned out we'd drifted in close to the shore of a German shore defense installation in Holland.
Uh-huh.
And they ordered us to shore. Those are the ones in the raft that were at the ends of the raft. As I said, only the lower part of their legs were immersed. They were able to help the others of us get into shore. We
Right.
couldn't move from the waist down. We're paralyzed from that cold and that
Yeah.
length of time. But in any event, the German guards on shore then took us to their building and stripped the clothes off of us. We were in a warm room. They fed us some broth, vegetable broth. It was hot. It was good. Going down something hot in us, questioning us, but was nothing much we could tell them. We didn't tell them anything more than a name, rank, and serial number, but
Right.
they were quite concerned because there were 9 of us. They could see we were air crew, and they thought, well, with those many, there must have been 10, because the larger bombers carried 10. They knew that. But they said, well, where's your other crewman? And we said, we don't have any other crewmen. You see all of us here.
Right.
Because that's what our crew was, 9. And at any rate, they let us go to sleep. They issued us German uniforms, dry uniforms, no insignia on them, and allowed us to go to sleep on the floor. We awoke later, and there was a Luftwaffe, a German Air Force officer, berating the commandant of this installation for the audacity of having issued us uniforms, and demanded that they take back the uniforms. They did. They issued each of us a blanket, and that's all we had to clothe us for the next about 3 days.
Oh my God.
And even though we were transported by foot and by truck, combination of the two, it was over. It was winter. It was frozen ground. There was snow on the ground, ice, and to a holding point where we were held for a few days, and then we were moved over to the interrogation center in Oberusville, and held there in solitary for a couple of days for interrogation, where they fingerprinted us, took our pictures, and so forth. And then we were sent to an assembly area, a camp in Wetzlar, Germany. And we were there for a few days, and then we were shipped out to Nuremberg, Germany. We traveled to there, some by train, some by foot, and that was quite harrowing too. When we were on a train, we were in those what they call 40 and 8s. They're European box cars. They got the name 40 and 8 because they were built to accommodate 8 horses or 40 people.
Right.
And you've seen pictures of those, I'm sure. At any rate, they loaded us, a group of us. I think there were about 120 or so of us. About 30 in each of the boxcars. Only 30 of us in a half of the boxcar. The other half was occupied by 2 armed guards. They had a half of it all to themselves. We were squeezed in the other half, and we had to stay in that area.
Right.
And a few days we were traveling on that. And then we noticed the train would stop every so often, and we didn't know why, but then pretty soon it would start up and go again. And after several of those occurrences, the train stopped. We didn't give it much thought, but suddenly we heard the roar of aircraft and the machine gun, the 50 calibers. We were being strafed, and we couldn't get out. The guards couldn't get out unless someone from the outside slid the bar up to let the people out of the car.
Right.
In the middle of the next strafing run pass, someone from the outside did open the door, and we tried bailing out at that. And we saw what was shooting. It was a pair of P-51s. And we all scattered in the fields. It wasn't in a town, and hit the ground and get away from the train, because obviously they were shooting that. They didn't know what was in the boxcars. But they did see that there was a flat car ahead of those boxcars that had an anti-aircraft gun on, manned by a crew, and a passenger car in front of that was occupied by the German guards and gun crew, and the locomotive in front. So they assumed that the planes pilots assumed that that was a military target.
Right.
So we lost some people there. And I vividly remember that when after those planes left and the guards ordered us back onto the boxcars, I got back on the boxcar and went over to the corner where I was before, and I have vivid memory of seeing where one of those 50 caliber bullets went into the wood right where my head was rested before. So I looked out on that, but it turned out that disabled the train. It didn't go any further, and we we were ordered out and we marched the rest of the way to Nuremberg.
Are you congested?
I'm okay.
You all right?
Yeah.
Want to take a break?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. All right.
This gets a little emotional at times,
I understand.
but that's, well, that was just one end. And there were a number of instances where were close calls and so forth. We made it out. We were liberated on the 29th of April in Moosburg.
Okay.
That was Stalag 7A.
Uh-huh.
And it was Patton's 14th Armored Division that liberated us.
Oh, okay.
The day of the liberation, I had been suffering from several days with infected legs. And I don't know what the cause of the infection was, but I couldn't walk. It'd take me about an hour to stand up in the morning. And it was around about it was 29th that the camp was liberated, but it was the 5th of May that the Army was able to send some personnel into the camp.
Right.
And there was a Army medic there that some of my buddies helped me over there, and he sent me over to a field hospital that was nearby, a tent, like a MASH unit, have you heard of them?
Right.
And there they treated my legs, and I was, along with other casualties that they gotten from the camp.
You want me to get your tissue?
Yeah, do you got any? Well, I got a handkerchief. That's
You all right? You want to get you some
yeah,
tissue?
yeah, I'm okay. At any rate, they airlifted those in the field hospital from a nearby grass field. Let's see, what are those DC-3s, the C whatever they called them.
Right.
Anyway, Army transports. They airlifted me and others over to France, and I spent about a month in the hospital in Reims, France, and then came home. That's about it. I wrote it all up in
I'll
one
send that
time.
off with it. The manuscript?
Yes,
That's
you
great.
can have it.
Thank you. Great.
After the war, a number of years, I kept in touch with all of our crew over the years,
Uh-huh.
and one of them, a fellow named Bill Struder, lived over in St. Louis, Missouri, and he had quite a few medical problems, and one day he sent me something he'd written up, and apparently he had had some mental problems and was being treated for that, and the physician, I guess the psychiatrist or somebody, must have suggested as therapy for him to write up his prisoner of war experiences. And he wrote up something and sent it to me. And when he sent that, I thought, well, gee, that was a good idea, but I can think of a lot more things.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat down, and over a period of several weeks, and had to do quite a bit of research on dates and so forth, but I was able to write up our whole POW experience, which I did.
Great. Did you get any medals? Citations?
No, I didn't get any medals. We only flew 2 missions, so
Right.
didn't get any air medals. I got the POW medal, that was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you stay in touch with your family while you were in the service?
Well, I stayed in touch by mail when I was stateside, and by mail when I was sent overseas, but of course all that communication got cut off when I became a prisoner. My folks got a telegram that I was missing in action,
Right.
but they didn't know what had become of me until after the war. And there was an article in the Richmond Times-Dispatch which gave the names of a couple of guys, myself and another, that they just learned had been prisoners of war and been liberated.
Okay.
And that's the first they heard.
How long were you a prisoner of war, Bill?
I was home about 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, regular service and while you were a prisoner, what was the food like?
It was very little. And we were at the bottom of the pecking list as far as food was concerned over there, because they had difficulties feeding, the Germans did, feeding their own military, and there wasn't much for their civilian population either. So as far as what the Germans issued us to eat was very meager. It was supplemented by parcels which were sent into Germany by the International Red Cross.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget the ratio of how many it was supposed to attend. A box was supposed to be rations for I think 5 people for, I don't know, maybe a week or something. I don't know. It was supposed to be supplemental rations, but very few of those got to be distributed to the prisoners. Many were found in German warehouses after the war.
Right.
Never were distributed. And what were distributed had to make do for a much larger number of prisoners than intended.
Gotcha. Was there anything special that you did for good luck?
Anything special? What?
Well, did you I don't know, this question that they have in the interview, and sometimes I don't understand it. But was there anything that you did special for, did you pray a lot? Did you?
Oh, certainly.
You prayed all the time, I bet you
We did a lot of praying in that raft. Yeah.
I hear you. I bet you did. Okay. Okay, so you were ill supplied, low end,
Yes.
bottom of the tier. How about when you were around that, before and after the prison? And what years were you in the service anyway?
I went in the service in July of '43 and came out in December of '45.
Okay. All right, so before and after that 3 months, regular Army time, how was the food? How was the supplies?
You mean while in American hands?
Yes.
Oh, well, I had no complaint with the food. Many people did bitch about the food. It was institutional food,
Right.
but I wasn't used to eating high in the hog anyway when I went in, so food was, I could eat anything all right.
Okay.
They fed us well. I don't have any real complaint about the food.
All Okay. What was the stress like, or the pressure from your job as a navigator,
Yeah.
as well as when you were a POW?
Well, I was weathering my existence all right up until the time I got shot down. It was stressful, of course, as it was for all on any mission. It's the nature of the game. There was no escape from that. You flew on and hoped you made it through. And it was the luck of the Irish if you did.
Right.
There are many, many stressful times while I was a prisoner. I only mentioned a couple of them, but there were many times it was very stressful. It was stressful when we weren't in company with a large movement of other prisoners. It was very stressful, those periods of time when before we ever got into a prison camp, we had 2 guards accompanying us, and if it weren't for them, I don't know whether we would have survived the civilians. Mm-hmm. You understand, you were being marched through a town that had just been bombed, and here were civilians that lost their families and their property and nearly lost their own lives, and here a small group of airmen coming through that part of a group that just a few minutes before had been bombing them. So they didn't have any love for us, and if it weren't for the protective custody afforded by their guards, they would have done us in.
Right.
There are other stressful times, of course. We were passing through towns when they were being bombed at times, and just that alone, I mean, you're part of the target. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay, let's switch gears here. How did people entertain themselves?
You mean as prisoners?
Either or, regular before and after. Was there a way that you had to entertain yourself while you were in prison?
Well, yeah, there were many instances of people. I mean, you had a lot of time on your hands, and it's amazing the ingenuity that exists in some people. One example is, and this happened in a lot of places, the prisoners would, the canned goods that came in the Red Cross parcels, you remember the tin cans then, the seams of those cans were not welded as they are today. They were soldered shut.
Okay.
And what prisoners would do would set those cans on top of a barrack stove, heat them up so the lead would drip out of those soldered joints. They collect that solder, and they'd make little patterns out of maybe their insignia, that they wore, their wings, or some service insignia or something that they would carve. They'd use that as a pattern and make a little clay mold, and then pour the solder in it and make a duplicate of what they used as a pattern. And so they cast wings, their wings, or their army insignia, or make balls and chain, and things like that. A common utensil that most of the prisoners would make, we called ourselves Kriegies, from the German word Kriegsgefangen, meaning prisoner of war. We make our little Kriegie burners, which are basically a couple of tin cans. We punch holes in them and stack one on top of the other. We build, we get little pieces of wood, make little shavings, little bits of tinder, put them in there, set them afire, and you set a can on top of that Kriegie burner, and you could boil some water.
Right.
And thus you could utilize some of the dehydrated foods that came in the Red Cross parcels. Some of them made some very elaborate ones, which they devised paddles and made sort of a paddle-driven forced air furnace out of it. And they could heat up stuff faster with it.
Right.
But they amused themselves that way. You stop thinking about girls long ago and you think only of food. And
Okay.
you do a lot of bullshitting and talking. You do a lot of walking. Worst thing in the world you could do is to just sit in a corner and do nothing.
Right.
Yeah. I remember one time. It was in the Nuremberg camp, 13D, and in the compound, each compound, there was one kitchen, so to speak, that served that compound and all the barracks in it, and it was there that they boiled up the greens or whatever that they were going to dish out.
Uh-huh.
And then they would send a big kettle around, one to each barracks, and that was ladled out for each prisoner to eat from. And one day, as they were ladling it out in our barracks, they came across a big knuckle joint from some animal, I don't know, but it had been cooked many times, and there wasn't any more meat on it, but the bone had gotten somewhat soft after all these boilings. And so we cut cards to see who would win the bone, and I won it.
Okay.
So I went over and I became one of those guys. I sat in the corner and I was gnawing on this bone. And it was the first time I really felt full afterwards. And that was a good sized knuckle joint.
Right.
And I ate the whole damn thing. Chewed it. And I went to sleep and I woke up with the worst stomach ache I ever had. And that stayed with me for several days.
Oh my God.
But it was good while it lasted anyway. Yeah.
Okay, were there any entertainers before, during, or after? And when you went on leave, where did you travel in the service?
Oh yes, there were numerous USO type shows that would come around. They would come overseas, they would come into bases here in this country and so forth. There was a lot of entertainment, and many times they'd recruit the guys in the camp to put on a show. And I remember while I was in Valdosta, Georgia, we were just marking time at that place until we could. Valdosta was Moody Air Force Base, and
Okay.
that was a pilot training base. But it was a contingent of us that were waiting to get into navigation school, and they parked us there until the class opening in navigation school. So basically, all we didn't have any duties then except clean the barracks and show up for inspection each day and so forth. But we got to go to town a lot, and there was a sergeant there, and I don't remember his name, but he was assigned to whatever that part of the service was that provided entertainment,
Right.
arranged for entertainment at a base. And this guy thought of the idea he was going to put on a show featuring the people stationed at the base. And he recruited some of us to go in that, and I was a part of the McGuire sisters. And so we put out an act, and there were two shows, one in the afternoon, one in the evening.
Right.
And we put on our act there in the afternoon, and of course we diced up the act quite a bit to make it. They had us dress up, drag, and we were singing and cavorting around the stage. And the CO of the base was watching the show, and he sent word back after the show that clean up the act a little bit before this evening show, because we got people off base coming in to see it too. Mm-hmm. So we cleaned it up, but we had fun doing it. Yeah, that's just a story, side story.
Were there any pranks pulled?
Oh yeah, lots of pranks.
Lots of pranks.
Always. And pranks against your buddies.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. We did a lot of that. Where was it? We were in Dyersburg, Tennessee for crew training prior to being assigned overseas. And we'd fly missions out of Dyersburg, Tennessee, for various objectives.
Uh-huh.
And some of them we would fly out over a target area and be firing the 50 caliber guns on the ship.
Right.
We were training in B-17s, but it was all designed to fly as a crew and crew mission.
Right.
And so whenever you're firing those 50 calibers, you get a collection of unspent ammo too.
Okay.
On the floor of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'd take 2 or 3 and stick them in our pocket when we go back to the barracks, and a couple of us were delighting in going over to the next barracks and popping one of those 50 caliber shells in the potbelly stove,
Mm-hmm.
and then bug out of there, and pretty soon there's a great big kaboom and a hell of a lot of cussing
Right.
when that thing went off in the stove. And they couldn't figure out who was doing that, but we were the culprits.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Do you have any photographs?
I don't have any
Okay.
photographs of
Not a
me.
problem.
Was a prisoner. I carved out a wooden spoon to eat with. This is my dog tag from Germany, my prisoner of war dog tag.
Right.
And when we were liberated in Moosburg, prisoners delighted in doing a lot of things until we really got to get out of there.
Uh-huh.
And one of my crew members went over and got into the headquarters building for the camp, and they got into the files, and one of them brought back my prisoner of war record.
Oh, hold that up for
So-
us.
Yeah,
Hold it up there.
yeah. Well, it's a prisoner of war record that the Germans had, my picture and my fingerprints, so forth.
Easy, easy, easy. You're almost. You get that. Good. Good. Okay.
Okay.
And show and that spoon and that dog tag again.
This is a
I mean the
this is a spoon.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, too much, too much, too much. Here we are. Oh, come on, come on. There we go. Hold on one more time. That should do it. Jeez. Won't. Let's go sailing in there. Okay.
That it?
Yeah. Now the dog tag.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. Let's see.
I should just get up and do this. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. What else you got there?
This is a picture that appeared on the front and back of
Hold it up for me.
the 8th Air Force News,
Mm-hmm.
which is the 8th Air Force Historical Society magazine. And a few months ago, there was a picture on there showing a crew just following a ditching
Right.
and getting out of the plane, getting into the raft. And this pretty much explains in picture form what we experienced.
Okay. Cool. Got it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks for that. Where'd you go when you went on leave?
Well, we always go to town, of course.
Right.
When we were at that CTD, the College Training Detachment in Pittsburgh, earlier in the cadet training program, you get a pass. You go out on the town and be back by a certain hour that evening.
Mm-hmm.
And our particular detachment at Duquesne was on the bluff, just adjacent to downtown Pittsburgh, very close to the train station there. And there was a USO, but it was some other, the Variety Club they called it. It was a group of people in the town that were influential in theater and various things like that. And they'd manned this type of USO or USO type of operation there, and you could go there and they give you passes to go to movies, go to shows, various events that are going on in town. And we were in close proximity to that train station, so that's where we'd all head. As soon as we were dismissed to go on leave that Saturday or whatever,
Right.
we'd head down there and get a pass to go somewhere. And there was another detachment of CTDs out at University of Pittsburgh. That was out in Oakland, another part of town. Those fellows had further to travel in order to get there, so we usually got there first and got some pretty choice stuff. And one time, two other fellows, myself, we palled around a lot together. We decided to get tickets to the Duquesne Gardens, which was a ice skating rink out in Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
The other two guys, they were from part of the country where they did ice skating. I was down from just outside of Richmond, and I wasn't familiar with ice skating at all, but it sounded like a good idea. Let's go there anyway. So we went out, and on our free pass, which allowed us to get skates and everything. And they took off across the ice skating. They were experienced at it. I was not experienced, but I took off on the ice, stumbling around. And pretty soon there were two gals that came skating up. One grabbed one side of me, the other grabbed the other side, and they started skating around with me, kind of hauling me around.
Right.
And boy, I thought, boy, that's pretty good, neat.
Okay.
And so when the skating session was over, everybody was going up in the stands, taking off their skates and everything. But these gals told me that they knew I had two buddies with me. They said, well, after you turn in your skates, meet us up front. Peggy, that was one of the girls, that's the sister of one of the girls there.
Right.
She has the car, and we come back to one of the houses, and we have Coke and candy and cookies and all that kind of stuff. All right, that sounds great. And I told the guys, so we were all there. It can't beat a deal like that.
No.
And so we went there, and we had a very enjoyable evening. Then it drove us back to our dorm at Duquesne, and I dated one of the girls there, one of the two that was skating around with me a couple of times after that, and then kind of lost track of her. I sent her a postcard here and then, maybe while I was in the service, but
Right.
still had her address. After I got out of service, was gone back to school, I got in touch with her again. I was wondering what the situation with her was,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know whether she married or what she was. I got in touch with her, and sure enough, she moved to another location there in Pittsburgh, in South Pittsburgh. She was living then, and so we corresponded. And to make a long story short, I finally married her.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, she's dead now.
Oh. Sorry.
But we were married for 65 years.
Gee whiz.
I always kidded her about picking me up.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Did you keep a diary?
No.
Okay. What did you think of your fellow officers and soldiers?
Oh, I had a lot of good buddies in the service, and I really had no complaint with officers above me or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a very good relationship on our crew. There were 3 officers, the pilot, co-pilot, myself, and all the rest were enlisted guys.
Mm-hmm.
But we never pulled rank.
Uh-huh.
We kept a close-knit group, and we kept it family.
Good.
Yeah.
Do you recall the day that your service ended? Where were you? What did you do in the days and weeks afterwards? Did you work or go back to school?
Well,
Did you use the GI Bill for to finish your education?
well, I did. I used the GI Bill, and I resumed college.
Oh,
Picked
okay.
up where I left off,
Mhm.
and resumed college, yes.
So, career after the service, what did you do? You know.
Well, I had several periods of employment. I started out working for a utility company in Pittsburgh, where I was married to my wife, and after the war, I didn't get married right after the war. It wasn't until after I got out of school, a year after I gotten out of school. It wasn't until 49 that we were married. But I had a job with the utility company up there, Duquesne Light Company, and in an engineering position. And I left them later after several years, I left them to take an engineering job with Esso Research and Engineering Company, first in the Pittsburgh office and then later in their headquarters in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1964, I left them and came to work for the Defense Department in Washington, D.C., lived in Alexandria and worked in Alexandria, Virginia
Okay.
for them in an engineering billet, and retired from that in
Uh-huh.
September of '83.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. And you've been retired since '83?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Obviously, you made close friendships while in the service. Did you continue the relationships? For how long? Belong to any veterans organization?
Well, I continued friendships with the crew as long as they lived. There are 3 of us still living.
Okay.
I've done a lot of volunteer work. I'm on the board of directors in our homeowners association.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the board for about 10 years, held several positions on the board, from president of the association to treasurer and vice president and so forth. And I went back on the board about a year ago when I was asked. And I'm serving on the board there now. I'm active in our XPOW association, the American Ex-Prisoners of War organization. Right. I'm a treasurer in our local chapter, and I've served a little over 3 years as a national director for the Southeast region.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, I don't know. I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus, and I don't think I have any other association memberships.
You attend any reunions?
Yes, I've attended reunions of our group. I attended one reunion of our bomber group
Mm-hmm.
several years ago. I have attended conventions of our Ex-Prisoner of War Association.
Uh-huh.
I actively keep in contact with elements of the organization in my region.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Did your military experience, we're down in the last part of this now.
Was it?
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Well, I'm not an advocate of war by any means.
Okay.
I don't discriminate against those who were on the enemy side of the war from us in any manner. In fact, my next door neighbors are Hungarian origin. They're U.S. citizens now, but they, Emil, the husband, and Livia, the wife, they were brought up in Hungary and lived there until they came to the United States. It turned out they're very good neighbors. We were great friends together, and it turned out in the conversation one day. See, he was a prisoner of war too, because when Germany took over Hungary, they conscripted the young men into the German armed forces.
Right.
And so Emil became a part of the German army. And it turns out he was in a German officers' training facility in Wetzlar, Germany, at the same time I was a prisoner of war in a prison camp in Wetzlar.
Right.
We laugh about that. But he became a prisoner of the Russians after when the Russians captured him as a German
Right.
soldier. And he spent a long time in Siberia as a prisoner long after the war.
Mm-hmm.
Very bad.
Okay. Activities that of your veterans organization. What are some of the activities?
Of our ex-prisoner of war
Yes.
organization? Activities. Well, I of course go to all the conventions. I go to the mid-year meetings of the board. We do a lot of volunteer work, benefiting ex-prisoners of war and their spouses.
Okay. How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, I really don't know. I'm sure it was all one great educational endeavor. You get to tolerate people better, I think, as a result. I think you get to see both sides of an issue quite well. You come to appreciate the other guy's opinion and don't put it above your own opinion. I really don't know how to address it further.
Okay, last but not least, is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
No, I think it's great that you're doing this. I know it's being done by a number of different entities, and you're only one. This is the first interview I've participated in.
Well, thank you.
I'm glad to have the opportunity to contribute what I can to this. This is never.
This is what?
I'm glad to contribute to
Mhm.
this endeavor.
Oh, yeah, okay, so I didn't hear you. Well, we want to thank you. Thanks for, we're glad we were able to get it from you.
Well,
That we were chosen.
well, thank you, Carl.
Okay, Bill?
Yes, sir.